City Council special meeting. Today's August the 17th, 2016, and the time is 6:15. So at this point, I'd like to open up for public communication. Anyone wishing to speak, please state your name. You have approximately 3 minutes. Manny Carrillo? Oh, I thought I said okay. All right. Seeing no public communication, I will now declare it closed. So let me just go over some of the areas I should have beforehand. But, all right. So what we have on here today are the open session. Presentation of the 5-year capital improvement project budget for fiscal year 2016-2021, and also we'll recess to closed session conference with legal counsel existing litigation. We have 3 items, and then the property negotiation as well. So at this point, Madam City Clerk, thank you.
Ms. Murray?
Roll call.
Mayor, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Cruz Baca?
I think I'm here.
Councilwoman Susan Rubio?
Present.
Councilman Ricardo Pacheco? He just stepped outside.
He's here, but he's over there.
Mayor Pro Tem Monica Garcia?
Yeah.
Mayor Manuel Lozano?
All right, they're present. All right, thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, legal counsel. All right, so at this point, the first, I guess it's the capital improvement to take that first, right?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and members of the City Council. I'm going to give a brief overview of the capital improvement budget and about some of the projects that are proposed briefly, and the directors who will be overseeing those projects when they're approved are also here to answer any detailed questions that you may have about those projects. The CIP budget is both an expenditure and a planning tool. I do want to call to your attention that we will only be approving the funding for the 16-17 year projects as they're shown in the staff report and in the PowerPoint. So those are the projects that are proposed to be approved this year. Those are monies that are available to be appropriated. And you will see then in the next 4 years, you will see projects that are proposed. And this is where we get into the planning for the future. These are projects that staff have identified needs and things that will need to be looked at in out years. And the funding is not approved at this time, and oftentimes is not identified because during this year and as we get to the next year, we'll be looking for grant funds and other special funds to be able to fund those projects. And so we do give you a breakdown of the funds that are proposed. Out of these projects this year, there are a small amount of general funds to be expended. For the most part, about $10.9 million in special funds to be appropriated for projects this year. And I do want to point out that the City Council, these are the projects that are recommended by staff. The City Council can give us direction to remove a project, push it out a year, take a project that's maybe in an out year and move it to a sooner year. But just keep in mind that the monies that are appropriated in this current year are available, and not a whole lot of other funds are available. So it may mean if you want to do a special fund project sooner, we might have to look at moving one of the ones that's proposed for this year out. So it's a little bit of a balancing act. We've tried to minimize the use of general funds this year just to protect the fund balance of the city.
I have a question.
Yes.
Before you move on, you said the special funds, when we could allocate them to something else. Are some of them earmarked for specific things, or can we just shift them around to whatever we may need them for?
Each fund is a little bit different, and you'll see those funds as we get on to the next slides. For example, gas tax is restricted to projects that are within the right-of-way, so it includes curb and gutter, sidewalks, street paving, traffic signals, and that type of thing. Proposition A and C are restricted to transportation. So staff, when they put this together and made their recommendations, they looked at the special funds and how they are allowed to be used, and then appropriated into those type of projects.
And the part where it says funding to be determined, so these funds in this column 17, 18, even though they've already been more or less thought of or have been considered, there is no funding for them yet. Is that correct?
Correct. Any of these years, in year 2, 3, 4, and 5, these are basically planning years. So these are years that we'll be looking at in a year from now, and we'll be asking you to approve funding for those projects.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next page, a few of the items for basically information services and administration, some new workstations that are in need, some upgrades to the network, and upgrades to the server. And those, for the most part, the general funds, just because they don't qualify for the special funds. And then for the police department, we're looking at purchasing 3 new hybrids for code enforcement and parking control. And those are being used, air quality improvement funds are being recommended for that purchase. And then we get into public works, and there's a number of projects. Feel free to stop me if you have a question. Sam is here if you have any detailed questions on any of the projects. Again, you'll see in the first column the description of the project, and then the funding source that we're recommending, and then the recommended amount for that project. We have a couple adjustments. For example, when you see this $50,000 as a negative, it's because we identified that we didn't need an amount that was previously approved for this project, and so we're actually reducing that amount. So we've got purchase of new hybrid vehicles, banner poles to go in at least 3 locations in the city where we can advertise city events and special events, enhancement to the bus stop shelters, trash bins and benches, citywide sidewalk improvements, upgrades to the CNG fill station at the city yard, complete street construction of Main Street, Corax storm drain, Fraser Avenue pedestrian and bicycle improvements, Main and Pacific traffic signal and rail crossing improvements. That there is grant funded, and that would be also to help us move ahead with our quiet zone in the city.
Excuse me, it says in the decision, wasn't that really supposed to be down in the city, that's what the crossing actually is? Downing, which is,
Yeah.
oh, it's not that.
Yeah, the location is Pacific and Bogart.
Bogart, okay, that's what, because it's, well, since they hit like that, Downing and Bogart sort of, yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And if there's no other questions, we'll move on to the next page. We're looking at funding the completion of the median landscaping, which we should have to do at a city council meeting in September to move ahead with the bid process so that we can have that installed during the winter and ready to grow in the spring. We've set aside funding for quiet zones, construction to keep moving ahead with that. Then we've got some paving, bike trails. The smart parking project is a grant fund for our parking structure here that will help identify for people to come into the ground floor. It will tell them which level to go to in order to find a parking space. And of course, Walnut Creek Parkway, which we're also still looking for. I'll skip over this page unless you have any other questions.
Where's the funding for the quiet zone?
I'm sorry, if you could go back.
The quiet zone.
We've got, where did we go?
No talk.
Metrolink. Metrolink, I
Oh,
believe, is
got it.
going to be taken care of.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And up here, yeah, right here. STP, which is a federal funding, is kind of the next phase of our quiet zone. You saw on the previous page, the Pacific, and that's because we've applied for a grant. I think that's approved, Sam?
Yeah, the funds for Pacific and Bogart are approved. I would say approved program. For this medical program, the $500
Yeah, we could share here so we can hear you.
For the mic.
So, the surface transportation program, that is federal funding, and it's for the matching construction funds for the eventual Metrolink crossing project. Incidentally, did get nominated, Metrolink did get nominated for the funding. I'll be going to San Diego tomorrow to comment on our project, hopefully it gets approved. then that means MetroLink will have the $3.6 million. This is our match.
I'll be praying for you.
Wow.
Looking forward to that.
Yes.
So 3.6 million, they have an
Correct.
I have a question for you real quick.
Yes.
Sorry, do you have a
No
question
problem.
here? Is a McDevitt project here? Listed
Yes,
here?
McDevitt is definitely one of the crossings. We're trying to get 4 consecutive crossings done so that we can justify a quiet.
And we haven't started any work on that project in particular?
We did start some work because it was originally part of the Safe Routes to School plan.
Mhm.
It was in that study, and when we approached it, that particular intersection, we have to go into the crossing, into the MetroLink right of way. So we have to pull it out of the Safe Routes and do some more study. Then we put it on hold because this MetroLink opportunity came up.
So we started and it got stopped halfway.
Correct.
And so we're not doing any more work on that particular.
Not at the moment. We will, I'm thinking, in a few weeks, we'll come back to council for approval of the design of the gather and the stuff.
Very exciting.
Just let me ask you one more question, or
Sure.
rather a request. At a later time, can you give me the dates that you worked on that project? What date to
Absolutely.
what date? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
I have a question, I have 2 questions on related to the,
Okay.
the banner poles.
Yes.
What, is that really cost $200,000 or what? It says project cost reduced from $250,000 to $200,000, and then there's a reduction of $50,000.
Yeah, I think Sam can talk about that too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What are the banner poles?
They're basically the structural poles that will allow the banners to be stretched across the
Okay,
street.
and
They
how
have
much is
to,
that costing us?
We had originally budgeted $250,000, but we realized that we can probably do it for around $200,000. That helped us move some monies around for other projects that needed that funding.
$50,000,
Yeah.
okay.
So we're thinking 3 locations, and we'll come back to council on a study session to propose.
So we're spending $200,000 so that we can put up banners in our community, is that?
that's what.
Or are you talking about-
At the location.
Are you talking about putting like an extension of pole to accommodate them, or?
No, yeah, these are structural poles that
Right.
will go on each side of the street, and they'll hold a banner with tension, and it's kind of like, it's similar to a traffic signal pole, but.
Is it like the ones that they have like in Monrovia or Covina? Is that what we're talking about? So that we can even put Christmas decorations like we used to have a long time ago in Baldwin Park, where the Christmas decorations, I don't know that you remember back then,
Years
it's been
back.
so long, where they would stretch the Christmas decorations across Main Street in Ramona, you know, those old fashioned ones, but they would stretch across the street. I know that
Absolutely.
Covina still does it, and Monrovia, I believe, still does it. Those are the 2 cities that I can think of right now that still does it.
Yes.
But are you, they also have these banners that announce about the 5K, let's just say, or
Yeah.
whatever's going on within the city. Would there be, I know that this is in the future, would there be a possibility that if someone wants to advertise, they could pay us for it?
I don't see we can explore that possibility, but it'd be a use.
My other question was related to the alleys. Did we pave the alleys according to our plan, or is that on hold? Is that
No, actually, it's very exciting. We break ground on Monday.
Okay, for how many alleys?
We have 3 alleys that we're doing, and then we're doing 10 more in Ohio. And we're starting at the alley, LA and Hornbrook, and on 10 more in Ohio on Monday.
Okay, because my preference would be to use this $200,000, but it's Measure R, so I don't know if that's for more alley paving, because I know that that's necessary. So, would it be possible for us to hold this item and really take a closer look at the banner poles and whether it's really worth it?
Yeah, it's the council's, and Sam, I think you can comment, the Measure R would qualify for.
Measure R would definitely qualify for paving.
So it's the council wants, I mean, if you want to make a motion, and the council could decide now to make that change, or at the meeting afterwards, we're actually going to finalize this item.
Okay.
So
Okay, good.
that's an example of how the council can give us direction to make a change and put the plan.
Okay, good to know.
I have one more question. You're saying it's $200,000, but it's not just $200,000, right? Didn't we already pay either $36,000 for the structure for the engineering services?
Well, there was engineering design services that were expended. It was about $5,000.
It was 5.
So $195,000 remains in that.
Well, no,
So
that's
there's
already
a
been
different fund.
expended. This is $200,000 out of measure fund.
Okay, so 5,000 has been expended for the 200.
Yeah, so cumulatively, it would be $205.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so and then on to the next page, I think we looked at that one. And so again, we'll just skip over these because these are not proposed for funding this year unless anybody has any question. And we'll move on to the Recreation Community Services. Has identified a couple of repairs that need to be done this year to the ceiling and some of the ceiling tiles in the senior center using the park funds. And moving on, we have a variety, and staff really went to all the facilities this year to see what is upcoming maintenance so that we can plan ahead. And these are some of the items that they have identified for future funding. If you don't have any questions, again, they're not funded this year. We'll just move ahead to the next slide.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm sorry, I have to go backwards a little bit. Going back to Public Works. So right now we're deciding on how to use the funding and how it would be appropriate. And I understand that. And I want to know, Sam, if I can have you back here one more time to answer some questions. I'm sorry.
Need to get a chair up here.
Yeah.
No, I don't mind that.
Okay, so just out of curiosity, how do you decide on like the projects that are going to be done? So, for example, I see the bus shelters, and at any given time, we could say right now we don't want the bus shelters, correct, or anything else. My question is, then, how do you decide to move forward with other services? Because I know we spend a lot of money already on these particular things. For example, the bus shelter, we already spent $66,782, correct? So
we have spent some money, but we haven't spent. I don't believe we spent $66,000.
but we're almost there. I can tell you, we're going to get there pretty soon. So my question is, shouldn't we make that decision together? So, for example, we're not going to move forward with the bus shelter, then shouldn't we wait to pay any engineering services to make sure that we're not spending money for design purposes and not use it? Because I also see that, for example, the pools that Councilmember Monica was talking about, same thing, we had already spent $5,000 on engineering services, and so there's like 7 things that I see here that we already spent nearly $400,000 on, and then if we don't decide to move forward with these projects, then those $400,000 are lost. Well, not lost, but technically on hold, yet we could have used all that money for something else. So is there a better way that we can figure out how to plan projects a little better, that where this comes to us before we actually pay the engineering services, so we don't spend that money before we actually make the decision? Can you help me out? How can we fix that?
Yeah, well, actually, this is a good time to do that. This is why we're bringing the CIP to council. So if there's a particular project that we plan to add it to our CIP. As to the prioritizing of projects in the past, I'm not too sure, and I can't speak on how that came about, but I feel like a lot of those projects were from council direction. So.
But just for clarification, it wasn't council direction, but that's exactly why I'm saying it, because I don't remember giving direction on any of these things. And like I said, $400,000 later, if we decide not to move forward with these projects, then those $400,000 are lost. And so I want to figure out a merit the way we can fix this so we're not spending that money if we're not going to move forward with projects. If we are, that's okay, but I can see those $400,000 going to be used somewhere else. And I know some of it is grants and other money, but nonetheless, that staff time we spent, money we spent, and then we're going to put them on hold. Then we should have done that the following year when we actually decide to move forward with the project. So,
Mayor,
what is your recommendation?
Hold on. Go ahead. Then we'll go to Ricardo. Go ahead.
What's your recommendation
Mayor,
to help us?
hold on. Let him say. Go ahead.
Yeah, so putting these projects and using this CIP list as a planning tool, this is a very good time for everybody to get involved and decide how we want to prioritize projects. Like Shannon mentioned before, this is what we're going after to be approved this year, but we're planning the next 5 years now as well. So this is a good time to start getting all those projects we want to add so that we can start putting together the funding.
Okay, now let me ask you another question. This is not necessarily consensus, correct? Because it was brought forward. Remember, I made the recommendation to Rose, but this is not time sensitive, and the reason I'm asking is that maybe we wanna listen to the presentation, take the report home, and maybe bring it back the next council meeting and really take our time, you know, on our own, prioritizing and see what's important to the council. I mean, I would narrate that recommendation because it's a lot to read and a lot to take in. And I personally don't wanna make decisions on this kind of money right here on the spot. I'd rather listen to the presentation and bring it back at another council meeting so we can read all of us know, make that decision. I don't know if you can answer.
No,
your question.
hold on, no, Councilman Carlos Pacheco, no, go ahead.
My understanding is that we're looking at this so we could approve it. And I know that looking at these projects, a lot of them either came from needs that the staff thought we needed to recommend, or some of these came from staff from the city council. Right, so they were already sort of given direction to look into some of these costs. And so, for example, you know, storm drains, I'm sure that's been on our CIP list from previous
Yes,
years to make sure that we're doing those.
that's a good example of a project who has been on the list for quite some years.
Right, the pedestrian and bicycle improvements, we've been promoting bicycle safety and pedestrian improvements throughout the last few years. Traffic signals have been a big push in the city council. The median landscaping and research, that's something that we had several meetings on with the city and the consultants. We had at least 3 or 4 meetings with them to be able to decide what kind of landscaping we had. So rather than delay this, I would say let's move forward and you brought this to us. We've all had at least a week to look it over. We've been exposed to a lot of these projects throughout the last few, most of this year. So I would say let's just move forward and with the project so that you guys can continue to work together.
Okay, go ahead.
I would like to have, I think that we need to, it would be nice to have like a little study session. I don't need us to spend hours and days behind this, but to see if like Councilmember Garcia or Mayor Pro Tem Garcia said, you know, maybe there are some dollars that can be allocated to the alleys and so forth, and see which are the alleys that we need to work on. You know, instead of the polls, because at that time the polls was a good idea because of announcing, and we were having problems with residents doing things that were going on. And if the alleys are a priority, absolutely, spend the money on fixing the alleys, very much needed. But I think that we all need to discuss this instead of just, you know, this is a great list and everything, but I think that it would be nice to sort of have and some of these have been around for a long time, like you said, the storm drain stuff. The bicycle thing, I found documents going back to 2011 when Marlene Garcia was still a council member, that she had brought it to the
Yes,
table. So they've been around for a long time. So I think that, you know, we need to see, yes, this is a wonderful list. What are the priorities so that we can all agree on this, you know? The polls may not be a good idea anymore.
Right.
It may be 9 months later, whenever I brought it up. The alleys may be the better way to go because of, you know, the way they look. So, you know, so I don't know, I personally would just like to have like a type of a study session where we can all discuss it and come up with the priorities for what the money is best spent on.
Go ahead.
I'm looking at this list, and a lot of these items do look familiar, and I know we were working on them years, but that banner pole was one that caught my attention only because of the amount of money. And I just know, you know, that street paving and alley paving specifically, maybe since I work with you know, that's spent in that area, in infrastructure, in some of our neighborhoods. So, I mean, I'd be willing to move forward on all the items with the exception of the banner poles, and we might not reconsider the banner poles and look to see what the greater need is.
Well, you know what, okay.
That's fine.
Well, you know what, at this point, what I will do, I think it would have been better had we just moved this whole time on this budget, for a while, because I know we're running behind, so. Why don't we bring this back, I mean, is it time sensitive?
The item is on your open session again.
Okay.
You can discuss it then. If you want to give us any direction tonight, you can make some changes and bring it back to you.
Oh, so it's on there, all right, so we'll
But
discuss.
we don't have to approve it. The question was, is it time
You
sensitive?
don't
Can we
need
pull
to.
it and bring it back?
Some grant items maybe, and we do want to get moving on some of the projects like the meetings, but I think in another 2 weeks, that shouldn't be an issue.
No, I think, you know, moving in 2 weeks shouldn't be that big of an issue, but we will be, the longer we put it off, we will be pushing it.
Well, definitely, the next one, we'll just really look at it.
And like the mayor suggested, like it is something that we, like, I want to ask a lot of questions when I look at the time and all the issues that we have. We're not going to cover this, and I really like time to get in deep into, asking the questions and knowing exactly what each project is and really exploring like the cost, not just the grants, but we have to recognize that, we have also staff time, and there's a lot of costs associated with a lot of this stuff, so thank you, Mayor.
All right, so at this point, so now that's a motion.
I'll second.
Second, any objections? Seeing none, so. All right, so at this point, we're going into.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
to staff for the.
Can I clarify the motion, Mayor, because this item is on the.
Yeah.
regular-
Oh, yeah.
You'll do it on
You
the
know what?
regular
We'll
meeting.
Go ahead and do that down.
So we can pull it and then bring it back.
Right,
Yes.
just
on the
pull it,
open
bring it back
session.
on the regular.
Thank
Yes,
you.
that's fine. All
So,
right.
so there's no motion,
There's no motion. That's
Thank
fine.
you.
Okay. All right, so the next item that we have
and no second.
is the recess to closed session. That's a litigation that we're.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to recess to closed session if it's your pleasure, and we have the presentation for the medical marijuana.
All right.
I'd like them to go first because we have a bunch of people here.
Okay, let's do that. Let's get them up here. Okay.
All right, so we'll be going into closed session, everybody except for the medical